Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us here for another installment of MediaPost webinar series. I'm John Whitfield, SVP of Partnerships here at MediaPost, and we have a fantastic and informative presentation for you all today from our good friends over at MIQ, longtime partners and friends. We're so glad to see you guys jumping in and participating today. We also have after the short presentation, we've got a power-packed panel from senior execs from Xandr, Dentsu, Initiative, and LG Electronics, and of course our friends at MIQ. So stay tuned for that panel presentation after a short presentation from our friends over at MIQ. But first, let me just say these MediaPost webinars bring together media, marketing, and advertising communities to learn more about the methodologies and the technologies that make effective business possible across a variety of categories. And these are brought to you by top solutions providers, marketers, and practitioners in our industry. So we're so glad that you're all here with us today. We've got again a great session for you. And so to kick things off, we have a short presentation from Moe Chughtai. Mo's the group. Hi, Mo. Mo's the group product manager at MIQ here. And he's going to review a new era of TV, how TV is working to drive real marketing outcomes. Mo, how you doing?
Doing well. Thanks so much, John.
Yeah, looking good, and so glad you could be here to kick things off for us. Again, we really appreciate your continued partnership and just working with us on a variety of different levels on the event side and webinars and whatnot. So thanks for joining us, and we're really excited about the panel that's going to follow too. So without any further ado, well, actually, before I turn it over to you, let me just mention to the audience here, after this presentation and panel today, we'll have time for a question and answer session, and you can submit your questions at any time during the presentation or during the panel in the question box found on the GoToWebinar interface here. So feel free to do that as we go along here, and we'll get to your questions. And without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Mo. Mo, take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, John. And everyone, thank you for joining the session. As John sort of mentioned, this is going to be a session that's on how TV is working to drive marketing outcomes for advertisers. We've heard a lot about advanced TV this year. If you work in the marketing industry, it's really hard to get away from all that's going on the TV side. I think what we wanted to do in this session, both in the presentation that I'll go through now, as well as the amazing panel that John sort of referenced after the fact that I'll introduce, is really the next stage on the kind of TV journey, right? We're seeing marketers adopt advanced TV, connected TV, addressable, data-driven linear, all the kind of acronyms in mass. And what we want to do today is talk about, well, okay, so we know that this is important. Let's not talk so much about the what. Let's talk instead about the how and the why. And so that's going to be the bulk of the presentation that I'll go through today, and then I'll hand it off to the panel. Again, if you've got questions as you go through, feel free to sort of include them in the chat. We'll cover them as we sort of progress. So first of all, on the note of speaking about the why and the how, the first thing we wanted to look at is, what are we hearing from our marketing partners in terms of why they are investing in in advanced TV, and specifically in connected TV, which seems to be the kind of biggest driver for advanced TV this year. And what we've heard is, this is a study from eMarketer, but we've heard sort of similar, learnings from a variety of different sort of approaches, is marketers are really looking for a couple of key benefits when it comes to advanced TV. Benefits like being able to reach their audiences in a more addressable and data-driven and targeted way, being able to measure outcomes and actually achieve true marketing outcomes as a result of their kind of media investment. There's obviously some of the benefits that are inherent in TV advertising, things like having a bigger screen and being able to garner additional attention from your users, but really that sort of addressability and measurability tends to be the thing that we hear most from our marketing partners in terms of why they're looking to invest in connected TV. And just in terms of kind of looking at all those data points and trying to interpret them in a manner that we as sort of marketing professionals can kind of take away, I think we've noticed two broad trends in the data when we speak to advertisers about why they're investing in advanced TV. The first is finding and targeting audiences efficiently, really aiming to maximize the reach and frequency against their target audiences in a data-driven way across the TV landscape. So that's all about, making sure I'm reaching the right audience, the right number of times over the course of a campaign. And the second is marketers that are looking to connect the dots between TV investment and actual marketing outcomes. These are marketers who have started to make the transition into a more kind of measurable, addressable TV universe where, TV dollars in, they're looking to demand sort of increasing transparency out of the actual results that are coming from campaigns. And so these tend to be the two broad areas that we hear our sort of marketing partners talk about when they're seeking sort of results from connected TV. In order to sort of achieve some of these goals, whether you're a marketer or sort of a provider who works with a marketer on the reach frequency side, or you're someone who's really looking to drive sort of business outcomes, in either way, we found in order to achieve these goals, you need sort of three kind of core components. Marketers need the right tools, which allow them to sort of trade and run and optimize their campaigns effectively on TV. They need the right supply. So, consumers today have way more options when it comes to TV content than they had before. And so if you're a marketer, you need to have access to as broad a swath of supply as possible. And I'll talk about some of those different supply types in a second. And this is probably, some of the most overlooked sort of area is marketers need cross-channel data that allow them to connect the dots between digital and TV. And I'll talk about some of the ways that we've seen that data sort of encompass. But the important thing is being able to actually, have data that covers both traditional TV and traditional advertising more generally, as well as the new kind of digital investments that marketers are making. To talk about each of those in a little bit more detail, on the tool side, I think one of the most exciting sort of outcomes as audiences sort of transition from traditional cable broadcast television to more streaming digital variants is our ability to then take that sort of audience consumption and turn it into more targeted advertising for those same audiences. And so programmatic and streaming television have really allowed marketers to identify and reach these audiences in a more efficient manner than they were able to in the past. We've seen that happen in sort of two broad ways. So in the past, where marketers might look to find their audiences in the right contexts, so targeting the right or buying spots against the right programming in the right markets, really taking a sort of a contextual approach to where they think their audiences are likely to be. With advanced TV, with streaming and programmatic specifically, you're able to take a much more audience-driven approach to TV buying. And so that happens in one of two ways. You can either take a similar approach to what marketers did in the past, right, which is start with an audience and then find the publishers and context that that audience prefers in more of a data-driven way. And I'll talk about what that means in a second. And this is the magic of programmatic is rather than buying an impression against a program and serving ads to everyone who views that program, you can actually individually target audiences on a one-to-one basis, the same way you do with your digital or your social advertising, bringing that same sort of targeting technology into the connected TV or the TV landscape as well. And so we see that shift to more of an audience-based buying as one of the core sort of fundamental changes in the way marketers are using sort of tools to improve their TV investments. I'll give you an example of what that looks like. So say, for example, you're working with a big box retailer. I've used the example of Target, obviously one of the kind of larger ones there, but same deal sort of applies across the board. If you're taking a context-driven approach, you might, in the old TV landscape, look to buy against programming that is likely to contain shoppers of big box retail. So, looking at adults 25 to 54, some sort of broader demo like this. With more of an audience-based approach, we can actually do is pull in an audience, either first-party data on target shoppers or a variety of third-party segments, and match that up against where we see available inventory in the connected TV landscape. and find exactly on the left-hand side which apps, which devices, what time of day, what markets I should be buying in sort of an audience-based planning perspective. And MIQ has one of the type of technology that helps you do that, which we call the Intelligence Hub. But really, trying to see which apps and context target shoppers prefer. And so on the left-hand side, you can see target shoppers are likely to be watching TV content on the HGTV app or the CNN app or the YouTube TV app, the Discovery app, etc., as well as Chromecast, Roku devices. And so you can put together sort of a data-driven sort of contextual buy around those components. The other approach is just to target those big box audiences directly, right? So whether that's a third-party audience from an Oracle or a Factual, etc., or your own first-party audience, the fact that the streaming is happening via the internet means the advertising is also delivered in an addressable way. And so we see that shift to sort of audience-based planning as sort of a really interesting and exciting way that TV is evolving. Now, data and targeting and sort of optimization tools are important, but increasingly important is just the recognition that audiences today have more control over how they consume TV content than ever before. So there's more ways that there's more platforms, more publishers, more areas that they can go for TV content. And so if you're an advertiser, you need access to as many ad-supported contexts as possible in order to reach this audience. And so what that means is, your supply strategy really needs to evolve from a kind of single source supply strategy to an evolved multi-channel approach. So that means including, traditional linear in sort of that broad sort of reach component that allows you to reach an audience in bulk across the US. But it also means including different components and looking at inventory in more of a sort of holistic manner, right? So where can I plug in maybe some addressable or data-driven linear to get a little bit more targeted on my traditional investments? Or on the streaming side, how do I look at a mix of walled garden inventory, the likes of a sort of YouTube or an Amazon, as well as an open internet inventory to get both the benefits of the supply of one as well as the openness and transparency of the other. And then increasingly, connected TV is bought programmatically in a lot of cases, but many publishers prefer sort of that direct IO transaction as well. And so we found if you're looking for, the kind of best outcomes with the most efficiency, a mix of these two tend to be sort of a pretty good approach for marketers. So that covers the tools and the supply bit. I think the last bit that's really important is just the need for marketers to also have strong cross-channel data that connects the dots between their investments in the traditional channels and digital channels. We at MIQ partner with a couple of providers of a piece of technology called ACR, automatic content recognition. That just allows us to see anything that happens on a TV screen, either traditional or streaming. And we surface that to our marketing partners, to our advertisers, in a way that allows them to bring in their own first-party data and plan both OTT and linear sort of side by side. The important thing, though, is there's a variety of sort of cross-channel data sets that are out there, from set-top box to ACR, some of the more traditional kind of larger panels as well. The important thing is marketers need access to data that allows them to not just connect the dots between digital and TV, but also bring their own data sets and commingle those in a way that allows them to do planning and measurement in sort of a cohesive manner. And then the holy grail, the end outcome is really helping marketers to connect the dots between exposure and outcomes. So what does a dollar or an ad exposure or a spot buy in the TV world mean in terms of people who are going to my store location? Or how does an ad impression in a streaming environment result in someone going to my website and actually going through and filling out an order? Those things are really hard to detect without strong cross-channel data. No one is clicking on your television ad and going to your website, right? That direct link doesn't happen. And so it's important to have sort of background, always-on data that allows you to sort of connect those two worlds and really, be able to tell whether a conversion was influenced by a TV outcome in a variety of channels. And so there's a lot there, but I want to leave you with a couple of key takeaways, and then I want to hand it off to our panelists who will sort of carry the conversation a little bit more. Takeaways for me when I think about sort of where advanced TV is and where it's headed next year is, first of all, there's more ways than ever for marketers to reach audiences on TV. The old adage of sort of linear TV being the way to reach bulk audiences is still true to a respect, right? There's still an opportunity to gain mass reach with traditional television. But traditional television really doesn't mean what it used to, right? Now marketers have the ability to do, traditional cable broadcast buys in a given market, to do more addressable buys with partners like a Xandr, and we'll learn a little bit more about that, or to buy impressions against streaming landscapes, both direct and through programmatic. It's important to sort of see the entire landscape of supply when you're considering a sort of data-driven strategy. The second bit is shifting consumer behavior means, again, that sort of multi-tier, multi-strategy, multi-channel approach becomes more important than ever for marketers. And then finally, the fact that you're buying across so many different channels and so many different publishers means, marketers need to start educating themselves on data sets that allow them to connect the different worlds together. MIQ, again, sort of uses ACR data, but there's a world of data out there that I think marketers are just starting to become aware of. So with that is the kind of takeaway that I've got for the presentation portion of this webinar. Again, if you got questions, leave them in the chat. But in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Aaron Majorsky, who is the Managing Director at MIQ, who will both introduce and lead the panel discussion of this webinar.
Thanks, Mo. That was awesome. Just going to ask our panelists to also turn on their cameras so they can join me. We'll give them a second. Awesome. We're all here. Things are working. I love it. Really excited to be here. I feel like it just feels like some semblance of normalcy to participate in an industry event and see so many people together at the same time. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you for giving me a reason to get out of my hoodie uniform that I've been wearing for the last couple of weeks and actually dressed. So by way of quick introduction, I am Aaron Majorsky. I am a Managing Director at MIQ. For those of you who are unfamiliar with MIQ, we are a tech-enabled service layer that functions as a programmatic media partner to both brands direct and agencies alike of all sizes. Our approach is to be screen, data, platform agnostic. That allows us to spend time focusing on all forms of outcomes that marketers have, but also to focus on emerging and evolving programmatic spaces, of which we are here to talk about one of those, which is advanced TV. Prior to MIQ, I was with several other digital ad tech companies. So I like to say that I'm born and bred digital, which sometimes historically felt like being the sort of underappreciated, undervalued younger sibling to television. So the fact that we're at a point in time now where we can really deep dive into the meeting of these two worlds of television meets digital, for me has always been a source of true interest and excitement. And one of the things that I like about it and find particularly interesting is what I consider to be sort of the many faces of advanced television. So that you've got, digital players who consider the evolution a world of possibility in terms of targeting audiences on a previously untargetable screen. And then you've got traditional TV thinking of leveraging digital as a reach extension. So how do these two come together? So more a performance audience side versus sort of like a reach extension branding side. And so for our panel today, we really wanted to bring together people who had diverse experience and perspective from both of those angles. And so let me introduce you to our panelists. I consider it to be a star-studded panel whom all combined bring a ton of expertise and experience in both the digital and television space to help inform our conversation. We have several questions prepared to talk about as a panel. At the end of this, we are going to open it up to our attending audience for questions. So for those of you who are watching, feel free to jot down any thoughts you guys have. We will have an opportunity for you to voice your questions freely at the end. So first, I want to introduce David Feeman. He is currently the head of media at LG. He's worked on the agency side, publisher side, now brand direct. His background includes focus on performance strategy and now broadly across all digital media at LG. So welcome, David. We've also got Maureen Bassetti, who is the Chief Partnerships Officer at Initiative. Maureen oversees all investments across Initiative's portfolio of clients. She's been there for many years. And before Initiative, Maureen ran national broadcast at Optimedia for over 10 years. So I'm really interested in all that traditional experience that you bring and your perspective on how things have rapidly evolved across the last few years. We've also got Brad Stockton, who is now the VP of Video Innovation at Dentsu. Welcome, Brad. He has traditional TV experience, digital experience that spans across both the client and the agency side. And right now he sits in a fascinating role that squarely hybridizes the two. So he's also got a lot of thoughts here to share. And then we've got Alex Chatfield, who is the VP of DSP Sales and Account Management at Xandr. Alex has been in buy-side tech for a long time. He started out at AppNexus and became part of AT&T and Xandr as part of their acquisition of AppNexus. So he'll have interesting perspective from the angle of supply, tech, also being part of an organization that has owned and operated content. So with that, I just want to remind the panelists that I've got questions prepared for each of you, but feel free to jump in. Let's try to, best we can simulate if we would be in person. If you have a contrary perspective or something else to share from somebody else's question, please do so. And right before I begin, I also just think it's important to add a little definition in our conversation today, because advanced TV can be so broad. I'm not really going to do much to narrow it. For the purposes of today, I thought we could define advanced TV as the gamut of possibilities that have emerged as a result of the digitization of television screens and content distribution. So everything from addressable through to data-driven linear, CTV, OTT, one could even argue premium online video, it's all sort of fair game to consider. This session was characterized being about the measurement opportunity that comes into play throughout this evolution. We don't necessarily have to be strict about that, because I think to be effective at measurement, you also have to consider strategy, data, devices, etc. But let's at least start in the vicinity of measurement. So jumping right in, my first question is for you, Brad. And one of the things that comes to mind for me is that now that so much of TV is digitally enabled and so many households are using screens that are digitally enabled, what does it mean for you for TV to be accountable? There's a lot of discussion around the fact that it's like newly accountable. Do you consider it to be a positive development in your opinion, or are we perhaps trying too hard to democratize media types?
No, it's absolutely a positive step forward. We want TV to be held more accountable. I mean, historically, it's been purchased on age and gender and just being top of the funnel awareness. And digital has always been credited with that last click attribution. Now we have the ability to take television and move it further down that funnel by actually tracking and measuring who's been exposed to our ads besides that adult 18 to 49, but that category buyer or that person that's searched my product. So being able to utilize our audiences, either first or third party audiences, and be able to track and measure them, whether that's in national linear TV doing index buying, whether that's working with our partners over at Xandr and doing addressable TV buying and really getting to the right household and knowing who is exposed to our ad and did they take that action. So at the end of the day, I think it's a great step forward. I think the reality is, and in the mindset of measurement, is that it's going to be uncomfortable at first, and we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable to get to the point where we can make it truly a currency to transact against. And I think that's really the goal. That's why we're pushing all of our partners to really make sure that we can get to what is that holistic measurement that we can do so we can make it cross-channel, cross-partner, cross-network, and ultimately cross-platform.
So, but for that to work, like you're saying, for that to work, we have to be able to measure uniformly across every screen, essentially.
Within reason, right? There's always going to be limitations and gaps to this. I mean, there's gaps in national TV ratings that are adults 18 to 49 based on a panel that's obviously probabilistic and extrapolated to the national population. That doesn't mean it doesn't work or it's not right. It's just about let's all get together and we have to level set on what is that source of truth to allow us to feel comfortable with that cross-platform measurement solution that's going to work for all parties. And I said it earlier, and I'll probably say it about 4 more times. We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and that's what's going to get us there. We're not there today, but we all have the measurement possibilities. But now, how do we all come together as a community, whether that's through the IAB, the 4A? How do we come together as a community and align on what is that source of truth to allow those strategic audiences to be activated and become the currency that we want to move forward with, so we can hold television more accountable?
Yeah, I think we will talk a little bit more about that currency factor. But I want to ask the question slightly from a slightly different angle to you, Maureen, because I'm really interested in this. So it's like historically, television was, it's got that, it's big screen, it's sight, sound, and motion. You know that when you run it, you're going to see it, and it makes executives feel good because they're going to have their ads in households all across America. And digital was like, okay, it was postage stamp size at the beginning, and it was all about driving performance. And that was sort of the angle. And I'm curious if you feel that there's still inherently some value to television being a mass reach vehicle and other screens being utilized to drive performance, or is it are we moving in the right direction by television being able to be a performance driver also?
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't think that there's nothing wrong with television. Television's still going to be used as mass reach vehicle, and that's good, right? A lot of clients need reach, and they need to drive reach quickly. If you're a QSR, you're a retailer, you're a movie studio, you have to get your message out quickly to a lot of people. And that's what TV, it's not like it used to be, right, at all, but it still plays a really vital role for a lot of clients to drive that reach quickly. And we see it in the numbers. So there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that works. However, that being said, it's changed. And now we have to manufacture the reach over different screens. It can't just be a spot on Thursday night. It has to now come from TV, digital video, OTT, using data-driven linear to manufacture the reach that we used to be able to get. So we look at it like a combination of channels, and each channel can play a different role in the communications plan. So TV can both be a reach driver, it can also drive performance. So it can serve both functions in the overall communications plan. Similarly with digital video, it can also drive reach, but it can also drive performance. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think they can both play multiple roles in the comms plan.
And so then what dictates what role it plays for each brand?
It depends on the objective for the client, right? Every campaign, every client has different objectives. Sometimes we're trying to drive consideration. Sometimes we're trying to drive awareness. Sometimes we're trying to drive advocacy. And again, it really depends on the objective for the client and that campaign. And really, we use our channel planning tools and allocations to determine what the right KPIs are, and then what are the right channels to meet those KPIs. So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. It's going to vary based on every single client.
I have one quick follow-up question to that before I have something for you, David, just teeing you up there. So, Maureen, what role does frequency play in the new world of television? Does it become more or less important now that you can actually think about driving in-store foot traffic or offline sales? Like, does frequency then become less significant of a factor?
No, I've actually seen frequency become more important of an issue, because right now TV still drives reach, but it's actually driven more frequency because of the shortage in ratings. So we're seeing actually there's cases where we have too much frequency, and we need to also manage frequency across screens because there's a lot of duplication and there's waste. So frequency I think has actually become more important because we do have measurement challenges right now, and if we can't appropriately account for frequency across screens, again, we could be wasting money, and then we need to maybe take some of that money out of television and maybe move it into other places. So I actually think it is incredibly important and something we put a lot of focus and attention on for clients.
Brad, you're seeing similarly?
Yeah, I mean, that's spot on across the board. I mean, frequency is always going to continue to be an issue in television. I mean, it's the thing that we didn't speak about for a long time, that you're building reach through high frequency. And I think our partners over at, whether it's Xandr or the Addressable Partners, they put together some really new ways of activating to utilize and go after those underexposed or unexposed audiences. So I don't want to steal any thunder from you, Alex, but I think that's what we're all trying to get to, is try to manage that frequency in linear television and try to find that next unique audiences. And it's beyond television. To Maureen's point, it's cross-platform. It's whether that's take that money and move it into addressable TV, move it into online video, or connected TV. But where's that unique audiences, those underexposed and unexposed, to get to that next reach point?
Which then, like you said, it puts a lot of more accountability and ownership on the data that's being utilized, the technology that's being utilized to be able to help that. Alex, what are you seeing as the role of buy and sell side tech in being able to solve for some of these challenges of appropriate frequency, but then also being able to measure outcomes?
Yeah, it's a great question. TV measurement really starts with identity, and the beauty of advanced TV is that we can actually report and measure which households have been exposed to a television ad. And that piece of identity enables really three things. The first is the ability to do frequency capping much more effectively. So you're able to frequency cap across programs, across devices using that identity. You're also able to track conversions. And this is a huge evolution, the ability to know that a household was exposed to a TV ad and later went to a physical store location or did an online purchase. And having that conversion attribution is a huge focus area for buy-side technology. And the last piece that identity unlocks is audience insights. So being able to look at who is converting and attach all the different pieces of data that you might have on that identity signal, so you can really enrich your insight into your customer. So that's really a lot of what buy-side technology has been focused on is that identity asset. On the sell side, there's also a lot of information that's been missing for buyers, meaning things like show level programming information, or is this a ad request for a live piece of content or VOD long form? So there's a lot of work being done on the sell side to bring those signals into the ecosystems that buyers can actually target and report on it, which will just make the media buying more efficient and drive even better ROI for the brands.
I want to come back to that identity factor in a little bit, but I wanted to ask David, so, thinking about all of these things that we've talked about so far, you come from an interesting perspective where you are both a technology player in this space, but you're also a brand and a marketer. From the latter side of being a marketer, how ready do you think brands like LG are to consider TV as an outcome driver? Are you guys thinking about it as a source of consumer electronic sales, or is it still for you a reach vehicle?
Thanks, Aaron, for that question. I would say it's still a bit premature. There's a lot of work that still has to happen in order for brands to realize the full potential of what connected TV could do in terms of actually having that lower funnel approach. Everything that Maureen and Alex and Brad said, I completely agree with. The industry is continuing to evolve. I'm very personally excited to see how that evolvement happens and how we could get to a point in time where anyone could be on their smart TV and actually make an actual purchase versus being utilized across device targeting and having purchase down the funnel. The ability to actually make a purchase on the TV is something that I know a lot of brands are very excited for.
And then have you had to make a lot, what types of changes have you had to make in your approach to building out a media team to accommodate some of these shifts, to accommodate omnichannel activation and to prepare for, you said we're not there, but what are you doing to make sure we're prepared to move it along and get closer to being able to use it in this way?
Well, it's a couple of different things. One, it's making sure you have a full comprehensive understanding of everything occurring within the space. Online TV, connected TV, whatever you want to call it, as I mentioned, continues to evolve, and there's still challenges with it as well. I don't want to sugarcoat that. It's a perfect universe, right? There's still issues with waste, as mentioned earlier, fragmentation, attention span, inventory constraints, stuff like that. So, I'd say number one, having a team fully versed and educated in the going-ons, having panels like this, having discussions occur consistently, making sure you're caught up to speed in everything happening. So be it working with Double Verify and Integral Ad Science and the likes to understand those various opportunities to tackle those challenges. as well. And then working with the various partners, right? Making sure that you have a full breadth of the value propositions currently in the marketplace.
Absolutely. Brad, thoughts on the quality controls? How are we doing there?
Yeah, I like to think of myself as an optimist who's also a realist and combined there. So I'm optimistic in the idea of, wow, connected TV has been growing and it's been a booming space, right? I mean, COVID has been a direct cause of the increase in viewership in connected TV, which has put a big spotlight on why advertisers are leaning into it. We know the viewership is growing there. We're seeing that from the likes of Amazon and Roku and so on and so forth, that the viewership is increasing. But to David's point, there are still holes in it. And that's my realist point of it. There's still transparency issues associated with this. And we might know what app we're airing in, but what content are we airing in that app? And that's what makes it very convoluted, the connected TV space, because you have partners like Sling, who's a great partner, a virtual MVPD. It's TV-like content because it is TV content, because that's what you'll be able to go onto and look at AVOD or SVOD content. But the point is that I know that I aired on Sling, but what channel did I air on Sling? Right, and then going further down, that's not just them. That's Pluto, that's Tubi, that's Xumo, that's all the major players out there. So we have to get to a better transparency when it comes to that space. And we are talking about this where TV needs to learn a lot from digital, right? We want TV to be more accountable to digital metrics. Well, the funny thing is, digital can still learn a lot from television. When I run a national linear TV spot, I know every spot that runs down to the second on what network and program and is posted out by a third party. We need to make sure that, would I love for that world to happen tomorrow? Yes, connected TV, we know it's not there, but we are working towards that. But it's a big element that we need both parties to also enhance. We need TV, yes, that needs to be held more accountable, but digital also needs to start being able to portray more metrics to make all of us feel more comfortable as buyers and as advertisers, where we have the opportunity to put and show up as where our ads are showing up.
I love that concept. I haven't heard a lot of people say that we can borrow the transparency factor and the accountability factor from television for digital. And so it's almost like we need to invent and create a unified collective of metrics that take the best of both worlds. And that could be sort of our gold standard at some point.
Yeah, and it's a lot harder. It's easier said than done, right? Because the idea of television, it is one to many, and we know when that spot's going to air, and the fact that it is one-to-one in the digital experience makes that really difficult to aggregate and collect all that data, because that one impression associated with all those impressions are all individual timestamp at all different times, yet it's aggregated to one large CPM and one total report. Where in television, we know that program. So it's a very difficult idea of what we want to get to, but at the end of the day, if we talked about the increase in investment in CTV, and it's growing, but it's not growing at the gangbuster numbers that we see the viewership growing. Why is that? We need more accountability before we start diving into that.
Maureen, talk to me a little bit about that. Do you think that is it the accountability factor that's lagging, that's causing the investment factor to lag? Is it is it the how much is the fact that are marketers prepared to use outcomes to dictate the investment, whether it's across television or digital? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree with Brad that is definitely a part of it. It's that transparency. It is the measurement piece of it. I also think that, if you're looking to shift money from TV to, let's say, connected TV, that will take time to get there because, again, marketers, it's a proven vehicle, right? So you're not going to make these big swings when you need to maybe test and learn your way into some of these channels, right? I think that we've definitely seen shifts, but to Brad's point, it's not commensurate with the share of viewing. It's not. And so we know that it will take time to get there. And again, I think it is testing and learning, looking at different audiences, looking at different outcome-based models, and making sure that the measurement and the transparency is better. So I think it's a multitude of factors that why we're not seeing this shift as rapidly, but I do think it's going to catch up over the next couple of years as all of those measurement and data integrations improve.
What about the fragmentation factor? So, and Maureen, I'll start with you, and then anybody else can comment there. I feel like where we've landed is just a hyper fragmentation, which is also a common facet of digital.
Yeah.
It's like you've just got so many options. There's so many different, you can buy from MVPDs, you can buy from the screen manufacturers, you can buy from the content creators. And so does the ability for digital and TV to work in concert outweigh the fragmentation, or have we somehow just made things a little bit more complicated for ourselves?
Well, like all things, we probably made it more complicated, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, you have to work towards what is the right allocation to, I don't think you need to buy everything. I think it's understanding where is that duplication and overlap, and should you focus on, one or two, the MVPDs, and should you focus on a device? Should you focus on content? Because like to your point, there's a lot of fragmentation. So what we're trying to do is really understand what combination of those different channels or assets are going to get us the best reach and limit that duplication as much as possible. So that's not the easiest, quite honestly, it's not the easiest thing to understand right now. But I do think you have to really look at all the different options again to figure out where you can get that best reach across all of those different platforms.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brad.
Maureen said it super well. I mean, the reality is like connected TV has been around for a long time. It's not new. It's just booming, right? That's with the enhancements to the internet, being able to have stronger streams so you're not looking at a circle bar loading the entire time you're trying to watch, This Is Us online. So with that mindset, I think the reality is that back in the day, anybody that had connected TV inventory, they allowed that to be accessed by anybody. It was trying to get that extra dollar, that next incremental dollar from a sales organization, which ultimately led to where we are today, where everybody has access to each other's inventory. When you look at the app level problem, that's the fragmentation that Maureen's referring to, right? That's where, whether it's the MVPD that has it, the DSP that can access it, the SSP, or the actual app owner themselves that can serve an ad there, who has the opportunity to serve me an ad as Brad when I'm watching on my television screen? That's why we have to make sure to Maureen's point, it's so spot on, it's so important that you have to know where you have the opportunity to air to ensure you can manage that frequency across the board so you can manage that overlap. Because the last thing you want as an advertiser is to be serving the same ad to the same person and think you have frequency capping on, yet actually you're over serving them because you're working with this two or three different partners that all have the same access to the same inventory to reach that consumer. So that's really why we see all these issues in that space.
Well, also, what about the factor of, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna align with both Brad and Maureen. One of the biggest challenges we have continuously is also related to the standard walled gardens, right? And the inability to have that overall buy versus having to do it direct across the board. And really, again, the fragmentation comes into play. That's a continuous challenge that we have. There's no real easy solution. There's obviously band-aid solutions, but there's no specific way to correct course on that.
Yeah, and I feel like if we were to liken that to traditional, you had the primary broadcast players you used to have to go to, but you still had this like consolidated power player in terms of a single currency for the measurement factor, right? And so do we need that? And so is the only way for us to sort of counteract what you're talking about, David, in terms of the walled gardens, is do we need to have a single source of truth, a single currency of measurement? And will they need to play ball, or will the walled gardens need to play ball for that to happen?
Yep. Like I want to purchase IMDb inventory through Amazon, right? But they won't release all the inventory across the various supply side platforms. So I'm kind of limited in my buying options over there. Just as an example, love Amazon.
I would love to,
Alex. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to comment on some of the points that the panelists made, which are fantastic and fully agree with. The fragmentation of supply, I think, is a not well understood friction point for buyers. Meaning, if I am watching a episode of The Deadliest Catch on Discovery and I am a Sling TV subscriber and I've downloaded the Sling TV app on my Roku device, in that, when I'm watching that program, there's 12.5 minutes of advertising, 10 minutes of that is going to be sold by Discovery, the broadcaster, the owner of the content. 2 minutes is going to be sold by Sling and 30 seconds is going to be sold by Roku. As a buyer, like I'm buying the exact same consumer, watching the exact same content. It's really important that buyers actually have access to all three of those supply paths, because one of those paths might be far more efficient from a price perspective. And that's not necessarily like well known. A lot of folks actually shy away from establishing all of those supply paths because they're afraid of duplication or running into frequency issues. But the reality is now with buy-side technology and buying programmatically, if you establish all three of those paths and rely on your like cross-device graph to do your frequency management, you can really drive more efficient CPMs for your brands. So it's a message that I've recently been trying to broadcast out a little bit to the ecosystem, because I think it's an important one that as we transition a lot of these buys to programmatic, you can rely on your cross-device graph to frequency cap across those three supply paths, and by having all three, you can really drive down CPMs.
I think just to cut in and build on that point, Alex, I think when we were talking, last couple of years on supply path optimization for digital, right? Looking at if I'm buying a video impression or a display impression, which SSP or which sort of partner in the middle, which tech am I using to access that impression? That conversation is so, advanced in the digital world, where you're looking at things like ads.txt, you're looking at sort of sell side tools, things like that allow you to see a full path and get the kind of shortest and more efficient path. The interesting thing when and MIQ is sort of a buyer on the CTV side, you're looking at the same sort of app bundle idea across multiple sellers and multiple sort of exchanges. That conversation on supply path optimization just hasn't really taken off in the CTV world the way we've seen it happen in the digital world. And it's a really interesting point you bring up.
Yeah, I think like a key piece of information that related to that is that the legacy digital world of banner ads is just dominated by header bidding, where like supply access is ubiquitous, and most SSPs have access to the exact same impression, can bid dynamically, but that doesn't really exist in the premium video space, where there's lots of waterfalling happening, and different SSPs have different access points or different portions of inventory. So that complexity is I think another factor as to why we haven't seen maybe the spend levels on connected TV relevant to the amount of like consumer consumption time.
And what's really interesting about, because this is a twofold conversation too as well, right? Because we're talking about the actual inventory that we can access and all the ways that everything you just brought up, whether it's displaying Roku and who has what access to what inventory, but then it's also about what targeting are you doing in this space, right? A lot of times targeting is cookie based, and this is connected TV, where it is a cookieless environment. So you have to rely on different sources to identify and match your audiences to for a data fidelity standpoint. So there's the inventory source that we obviously have some things that need to be figured out and enhanced and figured out. But on top of that, now you have the data element of it and the targeting capabilities. And what can you actually target there? If you don't have authenticated users at an app level, then where is that ability to target and match to? What are those partners? Of course, you have partners like TrueOptic that are amazing in the space of great device graphs, but it's still a probabilistic device graph that's going to be rooted in IP. And then you have partners like yourself who has first-party data, whether that's because they're signed up via an MVPD or your cable providers, but then the devices as well. When you get your LG and you sign up your television, or you get your Roku device, you sign up, you're putting in that first-party data, which allows for targeting to be so much more enhanced when working with those partners. So as we make decisions as people like myself and Marina, we go through and we're identifying, okay, what is that KPI? I mean, that's what Marina said, from the first question, like, what is that KPI that we are trying to achieve with those ad dollars? And if it's really those focus in on that bottom funnel on those strategic audiences, we want to make sure we have the highest level of fidelity. If we're looking for that mass reach and awareness, let's manage that frequency. Maybe the different partners you could tap into to ensure that you're managing that frequency, but it's really going to come down to understanding how the two work together. right? Being able to have the best of making sure you know where you have the opportunity area, the inventory sources, but then where you can overlay that data to ultimately get to the best measurement solution. And that's really a connected TV thing more than an addressable or audience-based linear, but it's definitely something that's becoming more prevalent as you start identifying, okay, who should I work with in this space to achieve the KPIs that I want to as an advertiser?
So there's not going to be a winner. It's not going to be old versus new, one over the other. It's going to be the combination of the two, which really is that's aligned very closely with MIQ's perspective and why we work with so many different partners to make sure that we can just bring the best together to hit the objective that's required and what angle one is taking. But we have to open it up to questions from the audience. But I have one last thing that I have so many questions I wanted to ask you. But one of the things I wanted to come back to was this idea of identity, because that's such a big part of this, and being able to, like you were just talking about, Brad, to use data to find an audience on a TV screen, you have to be able to connect it to some known attribute. And I feel like we have like two different concepts, two different opposing forces that are taking place in parallel in the space right now. On the one hand, you have this ongoing pressure for individualization, personalization, which is made possible by the data that comes out of being able to target data across screens. And then parallel, you've got increasing pressure for privacy, which oftentimes leans towards de-identification. So where will that take us? It's like we're on the precipice of all this innovation and being able to actually use data on these new screens. But is privacy centricity going to then have us need to innovate differently again?
Who wants it first?
Alex, Brad,
that's the like billion-dollar question.
Yeah. Is that coming up at the under, Alex?
I mean, every day is something we think about. It's like an existential threat and opportunity that we are laser focused on ensuring there's a solution for. I'm of the perspective that it's not going to be a doomsday event, that we're not going to go completely back to not having any idea, any information on the user or household that we're targeting. I think there's going to be a number of different solutions that probably get cobbled together to solve it. But at the end of the day, there has to be a fair value exchange between consumers and the media companies, so that consumers are incentivized or rewarded for opting in and sharing data, and that data needs to be safeguarded and managed very carefully. And companies should be held accountable if they're not doing that. So it's a very hot topic. Don't have the answer yet, but I can. There are a lot of companies, Xandr included, that are very focused on making sure there is a replacement or a solution as the ecosystem evolves.
For me, I look at it this way, right? There's been enough research that consumers want relevant ads, right? I mean, but they want to know that their data is being used for targeting. I think it's more of an awareness and transparency to consumers. And I don't think that they don't want target ads. They just want to know, if you're taking my data and using it, I want to be aware of that. I think that's the genesis of whether it's GDPR or CCPA. It's just really being able to say, hey, I want to know if you're taking my information that I signed up for, and as long as I have the ability to sign up and sign off on it, I'm okay with it, but I want to know. So for me, I don't think targeting is necessarily going away. I think, of course, we're taking a privacy compliant, making sure we're always following all the regulations and restrictions that are in place, but I don't think it's a matter of it going away as much as making sure we're just honest and open and transparent with all the consumers across the US and beyond, that we are going to utilize your data, and you have the ability to say no. You have the ability to check that box. I think that's what's most important, not that it's necessarily going away or shouldn't be used.
Got it. All right. Well, I didn't leave much time for our audience to ask questions, even though I said I would. I'd love to hear after this if you think I have a future in TV hosting. It's been great fun chatting with you. I didn't get to many of my questions. I appreciate your time. Now, what I'm going to do is pass to John at MediaPost, who's going to open up with questions from the audience.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great job, everybody. That was awesome. We have tons of questions actually that have come in. And some you've already touched on just in your general course of conversation here. But let me mention, well, first of all, first question is, let's just start with this one. As the industry continues to evolve, there's an increasing number of benefits to brands and marketers. but what do you see as the greatest challenge of where we currently are? So a sort of general question there. I'll turn it to you, Aaron, and then you can field it with the team there.
Maureen, you want to take that one?
Sure. I think like we talked about, I think the challenge that we have is the fragmentation that exists and being able to, excuse me, reaggregate those audiences and understand, there is a lack of measurement, true measurement across all of these different partners and platforms. And I think a challenge is how do we reaggregate that audience in an optimal way and really make sure that, again, we are managing that frequency, minimizing the duplication, minimizing waste, driving down our costs too. So there's all of those different challenges right now, I think, that we face in really moving more money into some of these digital video screens.
Okay, so this actually, Alex, you kind of touched on this here. This is from Lee from the audience. There's lots of discussion about frequency. What is the right amount of TV frequency and what is too much? And again, Alex, you touched on this a little bit, but Aaron, I'll direct that to you, and you guys might want to riff from that. Take it away.
Brad, I'm
Yeah.
passing that one to you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it gets super interesting because there's frequency at an individual platform, there's frequency across platform, and then what is the right frequency for you, advertiser X versus Y versus Z? I mean, how many times does a studio advertiser or a studio client need to have their trailer seen before it actually makes somebody go to the box office, which can't wait to go back to movie theaters, but that idea, or what is the right frequency for a Diet Coke versus a Bounty versus an auto, right? Those are all three different frequency measurements that's going to make that person go to store. But then also, what is that right frequency across those platforms? It's about leaning into a lot of our partners and getting to that understanding across individual buys, and then being able to utilize data science and insights to then connect the dots to what was that optimal frequency that drove that consumer to purchase. And I think that's where leaning in with our partners over at Xandr that have the addressable TV footprint, right? They have the ability to understand exposures at the set-top box level at those households. Again, your national, your addressable, and even now on the digital video with Xandr Invest. So being able to look at our tech partners, connect the dots to understand what is that cross-platform frequency for you, advertiser X, is going to be the most effective. And it's an ongoing story and conversation, right? It's not going to be a day where we're just going to say it is 7, right? It's going to be ongoing and changing as viewing habits continue to change and enhance.
Exactly. We've received that's the age-old question, frequency, and what is that magic number? And I don't think there's any magic number. I think, like you said, it's a matter of you've got to have the data, the TV data as a signal to then be able to say, I'm reaching this amount, this audience with this frequency on this screen, and then I'm finding unduplicated reach when I link and connect to other screens. And so you can improve on frequency. Go ahead,
I just want to add that it varies so much by category too. So we have certain clients in insurance that they're fine with 12 to 20 frequency, right? Because you need to see the ad a lot of times to take action. There's other clients that won't run more than they want a frequency cap, at three units and in 24 hours. So it really varies very much based on the category, the competitive landscape, and all those other factors. So they're never going to be a magic number because there's so many variables you have to look at client by client.
Okay, so here's one for the group, and I'll direct this to you, Aaron, and you can parse out. What about alternatives like attention and engagement? I mean, in your view, sort of who's doing something innovative in the world of TV measurement that you think will stick or perhaps change the way we think about TV efficacy or purchasing?
That's one of absolutely an interesting question. I feel like we're spending a lot of time talking about the capabilities we have now, but one of the things that marks our industry is newness and innovation. And so there are some people who are looking to shift from the metrics we're familiar with to like an entirely new concept of, can we understand the amount of time somebody is spending in front of a screen, which screens, can we watch the connectivity of their eyes to the screen? There's companies that are evaluating emotional sentiment, engagement from these ads. So I'm curious, David Feeman, have you seen anything have you been exposed to any like really interesting companies thus far that are pushing the envelope in that regard?
One thing I've heard about and did a bit of research on is what you just mentioned in terms of essentially having the ability to watch the audience from smart TV or other platform and gauge their responsiveness. I think it's going to have to go through a tremendous amount of hurdles in terms of privacy and legal ramifications until we get to a point in time where it's applicable. But you know, it's just something to be looking at towards the future at some point.
Yeah, I mean, T-Vision is the big company that comes to mind, right? I mean, that's the one that's actually looking at eye gazing, and if your actual eyes are on screen. Now, of course, you know, between compliances combined with getting to critical mass to make it actually transactional, but I think the truth of the matter is, we at Dentsu, we've started attention economy, and that's really about trying to transact to change the currency off of just whether it's age and gender or strategic audiences, but even take your age and gender and put it to who's actually watching the screen and be able to apply a couple different data sets to get to a new metric to guarantee against while still staying rooted in some of the traditional measures. So, we're having those ongoing conversations, and we're really close to getting that to be something to actually transact against for our clients. And that's something that we have had a huge focus on at Dentsu to get to that opportunity to understand who is actually watching the screen, because the last thing we want are ghosting of boxes where the TV is off but the MVPD is still playing with the set-top box. We can't have those counting towards this. So ensuring that you have actual presence in the room, eyes on screen, that's something that we are working very diligently at our shop and across the industry to get to that stronger metric to hold everything more accountable, which that's something we're definitely really excited about going into 2021.
Yeah, one thing I would add there that I think is really exciting is the ability to follow a television ad immediately on somebody's second screen. So we know a lot of folks are watching connected TV and on their phone or on their laptop at the same time. You now have the ability to immediately retarget a household that's seen a connected TV ad to try and actually get them on a device where they can click or really engage. And then you can measure, you can get measurement off of that. So it's a new measurement signal by following your television ad immediately onto a device that they can engage. And, we'll start to see, I think, your connected TV devices become more interactive as well, where consumers might be able to engage directly on the connected TV. But today, for the most part, actions happen not on the TV, they happen on your phone or your desktop.
Another thing that is maybe just interesting as a build on to that is we think about attention in terms of the, how long someone is spending in front of an ad or how, visible that ad is or how much impact it's making. One problem that, in the TV world is, we've got some data on in the traditional TV world, but not in the connected TV world, is co-viewing that's happening on a connected TV screen when an ad is playing. So if I've got 2 or 3 people in front of the screen at any given time, right now in the digital world, we treat that as sort of one impression, where in the TV world, that sort of co-viewing really is kind of a big problem that there's some data science and data behind. If we're looking forward a year, I'd love to see, and there's some companies that are sort of focusing on this, would love to see some data that shows, when I serve an impression on a connected TV device, on a Roku in Sling, is there one person watching that, or is that, 2 or 3 people in the same room that I'm making an impact on? And that feeds right into Brad's sort of attention economy portion.
John, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So we have more questions in from the group. Unless we're getting weary here. If we're getting weary, we can wrap. But do you guys want to take one more? I've got a real specific question about promises made by some of the suppliers in the industry. Do you guys want to take that on, or is that not of interest?
Can't wait to hear Alex's response.
Sounds like we're up for one more.
Well, actually, yeah, I mean, this is kind of an interesting one, and be careful about being too self-serving. But David from the audience asks, with all the options out there that make similar or competitive promises to deliver everything we're talking about, how does one choose or evaluate from a Xandr or FreeWheel, or going direct to the publisher, or going with the trade desk? So just help some of the folks who are still tuned in here, you know, give a little guidance on how they might make sense of the soup of options that are out there. And we'll kind of close with that one today, I think. Aaron, take it away.
Well, I pass that right to the panel. Alex,
I'm
I
happy
think you
to,
should go
I'm happy
first.
to take
Yep.
that one. Yeah, absolutely. So
$1 with Xandr. Sorry.
what's critical for buyers to understand is how a seller monetizes their inventory. And in the traditional display space, you know, it's like header bidding, and it's super easy for a buyer, which basically is like pick one supply path and bid through that path. In video, you find 3 different sort of monetization approaches in the marketplace. You find publishers that use their like a publisher ad server and have set up a traditional waterfall. So these are, you know, mostly publishers that are on Google's Ad Manager, their publisher ad server. And in that scenario, when a publisher is waterfalling their inventory, every SSP is getting a bid at that inventory at a completely different price point, right? So it doesn't matter if you're bidding $1 million CPM in your DSP, your bid is going to compete at a static price point on whichever supply path you're bidding through. And so as a buyer, you need access to every SSP in the waterfall so that your bid can actually compete dynamically in the publisher's auction. The second sort of monetization approach you'll find is sellers using FreeWheel's ad server, and a feature that a lot of folks call open competition, which is honestly a complete misnomer. What happens is SSPs that are trafficked in this open competition layer don't actually compete with each other. They're given a completely unique allocation of inventory. So again, as a buyer, if you find a seller that uses that setup, you actually need supply paths with both SSPs or all the SSPs in the open competition layer to be able to access 100% of that seller's inventory. A great example of this is Sling TV. Sling uses SpotX and Telaria. If you don't have a deal with both SpotX and Telaria, you cannot access 100% of Sling's inventory. That's just a reality. And then the third sort of monetization approach you'll find is actually a header bidding implementation. Unfortunately, like this is the best auction environment for a buyer. Unfortunately, it's the least common that you'll find today. That's going to change, but we're going to be existing in this environment through 2021, where the majority of inventory is being waterfalled or through this like open competition mechanism. So for buyers, it's a ton of education. Quite frankly, it's a ton of legwork and investment to really understand the different supply paths. My meta answer is like generally you shouldn't just buy from Xandr. You shouldn't just buy from FreeWheel. You shouldn't just buy from SpotX or Telaria. You really need to establish the supply paths that are specific to the seller. And yeah, that's something that I've been quite frankly focused on for the last year, and would be happy to talk to folks offline about.
Great. Well, that's fantastic. And I know we've got some folks on the panel that need to jump too. Aaron, thank you so much for leading a fantastic group here. Any other parting comments before we go, or can we wrap?
No, let's wrap. I mean, we could go on and on. I know that, but we were scheduled for an hour. We're far over. I want to thank everybody for joining us here, in the attendees, but also for the panelists. You guys were awesome. So much expertise, and I know everybody was really eager to hear from you and hear more from you. So with that, I'm going to say bye. Mo, great presentation. Thank you. And John, I'll let you wrap us up.
You got it. So if you asked a question today, don't fret. The MIQ team has received your questions and we'll get back to you directly with an answer. So don't worry about that. Thank you for answering or asking all the great questions. Also, just a reminder, a copy of today's recording of the webinar will be sent to all of you to your inboxes tomorrow morning in your emails. So look for that. Again, thanks to Aaron, Mo, Alex, Brad, Maureen, and David for a great discussion today and some great questions from you from the audience. And again, of course, thanks to MIQ and all the team behind the scenes there who put all this together, Alyssa, and et cetera. Thanks so much. We hope you found this helpful and informative. Stay tuned to MediaPost digital publications in your inbox for more informative webinars and sessions just like this to come. Thanks so much again to you all 6 of you. You guys were awesome. Stay safe out there. Have a great holiday season here, and we'll be in touch. Take care, everybody. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.